Good evening and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube, Iyun to Lean On. Today we're doing Siman Kuf Pei Dal 184 Orachayim. We're in the back of the base medrash over here. It was hard to find a side room to give this evening shiur now. They're cleaning one of the rooms. I'm sorry for the background noise. I'm sorry if there's any people that pass by that look uncomfortable with the camera over here in the shul, in a Haredi shul, smartphone camera over here. It's not a common occurrence. I want to talk today about, the Siman talks about the chiyuv of Birkas HaMazon. The last halacha talks about how much you have to eat in order to be chayav in Birkas HaMazon. Halacha vav, shir achil avarach alei Birkas HaMazon b'kezayis. As long as you have kezayis of bread, right? A kezayis of bread, you have to make Birkas HaMazon, even if you're not saveya. Even though the Torah says v'achalta v'savata v'rach. We learn the chiyuv of Birkas HaMazon in the Torah. You ate and you're satisfied. You're satiated. Now, when you think of satiation, it means you don't want to eat anymore, right? Which is the source of the halacha and hey, right? That you have until you don't feel hungry anymore. Meaning you can still bench Birkas HaMazon, even if you forgot to bench Birkas HaMazon. If you're not hungry, right? It means you're still satiated. Satiation means that you're not hungry. I don't know if that necessarily means, and this is similarly what the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Sefer HaChinuch, basically that it depends. It depends on the person. If you're like a person who has lavish meals, only if you're really satiated, right? Satisfied, right? Satiated. Those means that you can't eat anymore, right? If they serve you more food, you start eating a little bit, you leave over a lot. That's daiva hoser, right? You have your saveya, you can't eat anymore. You can't possibly eat anymore. But he says, if you're the type of person that's someone who is tanesim and you eat a little bit, only enough to kedei michyaso, he says, close from the chinuch, enough to subsist on, that you're just going to continue living, that you shouldn't die. Of course, you're going to be hungry. You're hungry even after you finish eating, right? You can bench already. You can bench, and that's called k'dei svia, which is chiyuv d'oraisa. Even if you normally only eat a kazayas of bread, and that fills you up. I remember when I was young, when I was more frum, right? For some reason, I felt that food was considered a taiva, and even regular food that was tasteless, eating extra bread was considered a taiva. I made sure only to eat the minimum, not to eat any more than I was considered sad kedei michyaso, in order to live on it. I shouldn't feel pangs of hunger, right? I would be a little hungry, but a lot of the hunger, as long as I wasn't very hungry, that would be okay, because I consider it taiva to eat. I remember, I was always very careful how much bread to eat at breakfast or something like that. I remember Rosh Yeshiva, big Rosh Yeshiva, they would have 2 slices of bread and 1 egg. I don't know how you fill yourself up on two slices of plain bread and 1 egg. Rosh Yeshiva had 2.5 slices. He would cut the third slice in half. Not any more than a half, because having 3 slices and leaving over a half is not okay. You'd have 2.5 slices and some eggs, or an egg, 1 egg, 2 eggs. I don't know. I remember being into this when I was younger, and I based it on what I saw from different Rosh Yeshiva. But there are people like that consider eating any extra food, even if it's tasteless food or doesn't taste very good, is considered an indulgence. It's considered giving into the Yetzer Hara. And you only eat what you need to survive on. And he calls that, according to the Chinuch, the Mishnah Berurah quotes the halacha, it's called kedei svia, means that you're satisfied. Which sounds like a chumrah, but it's really a kula, because if you consider that svia midoraisa, that means he ruled over here that if you're not sure if you made Birkas HaMazon, you have to go ahead in halacha Dalit. If you're not sure if you made Birkas HaMazon, you have to go ahead and make it again, because it's d'oraisa. And he quotes, that's only if you ate kedei svia. And based on what he says in halacha above, kedei svia is eating just whatever you normally would eat. It depends on the person. If he eats very little, that's considered kedei svia. So according to the chinuch, right, a person who eats very little and he's still even a little hungry, it's called svia, midoraisa. So you'd have to make, and he's not sure he made Birkas HaMazon, you have to make Birkas HaMazon again. Which would be, even though something derabanan l'kula, he would treat it something d'oraisa l'chomra, and you have to make Birkas HaMazon again, but it should be a bracha l'batala, because if it's not really svia, right, if you're considering this person k'di saveya in the category of d'oraisa, the chalta v'savata, he's not sure if he made Birkas HaMazon. He's going to make Birkas HaMazon again, and that's going to be a kula asli de chumra, a chumra de asli de kula. He's making Birkas HaMazon again, but it's a bracha l'batala, because he's not really full. My explanation of svia is the same by every person. Svia is when you're satisfied. And I remember when we used to have, let's say, pasta for lunch or something like that. I would be makbid only to have 2 plates of pasta. Most people eat 1 or 2 plates of pasta. But technically, if I wanted to, I always felt a little hungry. I wanted to have that 3rd plate, but because of my midos, or because of I didn't want to have too much taiva in my life, so therefore, didn't take a third plate of pasta. Now, if you put a third plate of pasta in me and you told me I was allowed to eat it, I would have eaten a couple of noodles. I don't know, maybe half the plate, and I would have left over. That's what sevia means. Sevia means I give you as much as you want, and in the middle of the plate, you drop your fork and knife and you stop eating. That's what sevia is. Daiva hoser. You have more than enough, right? Shaveya. You can't eat anymore. Not that, right? If meat is capricious and you're trying to subsist on as little as possible, that's not severe. I even remember feeling hungry, and I said I can't eat anymore because, I had limits. There's boundaries in life, vulos in the world. So obviously, this is not the right way to live. There are people that live like this. I looked at other examples, from people, other Rosh Yeshivas who did similar things. I can't tell you what they felt in their stomachs, but I can imagine it was similar to me. So I really think it has to be daiva hoser. It has to be that, if you give the person another plate, he would eat part of it and stop. When you stop eating, you can't eat anymore. Your stomach is too full. You can't eat anymore. In the Gemara, it's a very interesting Gemara. The Gemara in Brachos and Afchaf, the Gemara says, it's an agadata. The Gemara asks, why is Hashem no say panim to Yisrael? One pasuk says Hashem's lo yisa panim. He's not going to give favor to any nation. And then it says Hashem's no say panim to Yisrael. So Hashem said back to the Malachim questioned Hashem, how can you show favor to Klal Yisrael? He says, because a nation that I commanded them, they only make bread because when you're full, and they're medaktik al asman akazayis akabesa. They're medaktik seemingly to make bread mazon, even if only a kazayis bread or kabesa bread. A kazayis is an olive amount of bread, a small amount, right? I mean, maybe depending on how much matzah you have, that's a small amount. But technically, a kazayis is a very small amount. An olive, think of an olive, that much bread. A kabetza, think of a regular egg, that much bread. Right? Now, there's a lot of problems with this Gemara. First of all, Nagadata. Second of all, we're passing from Nagadata. Most Rishonim learn from this Gemara that they're medaktik, that even though the chiyuv midaraisa of Birkas Hamazon only when you're completely full, if you eat a kazayis or a kabetza bread, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, midarabbanan you're chayav Birkas Hamazon, medaktik al. Now, why does the Gemara say ad kazayis, ad kabetza? Why does it say both a kazayis and a kabetza? Pick one, either a kabetza or kazayis. If it's just kazayis, kazayis is smaller than a kabetza. So it's going to be ad kazayis, ad kabetza. So my explanation is a little different. Ad kazayis, ad kabetza, if you think about after a meal, even if you're full, right? The Gemara in Megillah and Daf Zayin says there's always room for dessert, right? What do you have for dessert? You go to a fancy restaurant, you might get a cocktail for dessert, right? What cocktail uses an olive? A martini. I think we're finishing Mesachas Adarim soon. I think I'm going to bring martinis. I served margaritas at the last siyum on Mesachas Suvos. I have all the ingredients. I might just have to buy olives for the martini. So a martini you garnish with an olive. Right? It's basically gin and vermouth, right? Mixed together, and then you garnish it with the olive on top. So that's the kazayis. The kabetza, let's say a creme brulee, a fancy dessert, or any type of whipped cream or ice cream dessert, usually have egg whites in them, right? They usually consist of egg whites. That's why it says both. Ad kazayis and kabetza. The only time you chayav, right? Really, technically, b'di'evid, right? If you made Birkas Hamazon, when you finish the main part of your meal and you're satiated, completely satiated, that you put a plate in front of you and you eat half of it and you stop eating, then there's a chiyuv b'di'evid. But l'chadchiyah, they're medaktik Klal Yisrael to not make Birkas Hamazon unless they have an amazing dessert, right? Unless they have a fancy dessert, a full meal. What's a full meal? Then you go to the end, you have a cocktail, and you have a fancy dessert, a whipped cream, ice cream, creme brulee, something like that with egg whites, something fancy in there. Then you don't make Birkas Hamazon. So it'll come out to this is a big kula that you don't have to make really b'di'evid if you made Birkas Hamazon after eating a regular meal. That's okay. You're yotzei. But Dafik al Atzman, that really the real svia, because that's what the Klal Yisrael is saying. We're going to give the real svia. We're going to do really what Hashem wants. Because Hashem wants, the purpose of the Torah is that everyone should enjoy this world as much as possible. Klal Yisrael is medaktik in the Torah more than everybody else. They make sure they enjoy this world more than anybody else. When they go out to the restaurant, they order all the courses. They order the appetizer. They order the main, and they also order an exquisite dessert. So you have that exquisite dessert. Only after the exquisite dessert can you say you're completely satisfied. Because even though technically you can't eat anymore, but there's always room for dessert. There's always room for a cocktail. There's always room for a good creme brulee. So you have your dessert after your meal, and then that's sevilla. They're only to make Birkas Hamazon then. Not that you make Birkas Hamazon because kazayis or kabetza. Of course not. That's not sevilla. How can you call kazayis or kabetza sevilla? The Torah says it has to be sevilla. no one's full after eating gazayas of bread. Ella, the Torah is of course telling you that svia technically yes, after you can't eat anymore. But the Kali is medactic not to make breakfast Hamazon until they have a full exquisite dessert, and that's why because of that chumrah, right? You don't make because of Hamazon l'chadchila until you have ad kazayas, ad kibetz, until you have that full dessert, and maybe that. So according to that, really, if you only had gazayas of bread or kibetz of bread, there'd be no reason, and it would be a bracha v'atala to actually say Birkas Hamazon. Of course, this is Iyun to lean on. This is my own interpretation. It's not meant to be taken lahalacha. You have to ask your local rabbi. But this is what I believe is the truth. Hope you enjoyed tonight's share. See you in the next one.